Hey all, my name's Amanda. Welcome to my channel, and today I'm going to give you some tips on how to crochet faster. So tip number one is to be patient. It's going to take a while to improve your crochet speed, especially if you are more of a beginner in crochet. You really want to focus first on mastering the mechanics of the basic stitches and being able to do, single crochet, double crochet, kind of get those on autopilot before you really worry about your speed. And if you're thinking of yourself as slow because you see other people crocheting more quickly, cut yourself a break, right? I mean, we all know comparing yourself to others in any way it's really not great for your mental health, but especially with crochet and anything. I mean, it's a skill. It takes time to develop a skill. So you just avoid comparing yourself to other people. When you crochet, the thing that you love about it is not, oh my gosh, this is so fast. Like you probably enjoy crochet for a lot of reasons that don't have anything to do with how quickly you're going. So number one was be patient. Number two is going to be to choose the hook that is right for you. So crochet hooks, there are two main types of hooks in terms of the actual shape of the hook itself, the end of the hook. And there's inline and tapered. And some people are going to prefer one over the other. I personally work better with tapered hooks. I know some people hate them. You could also consider the different types of materials that the crochet hooks are made from. There's metal, bamboo, plastic even. Some of those you might like better than others. You may also want to look at different handle types on crochet hooks. There's some ergonomic hooks that are bigger around. They also make grips that you can slide onto a more normal crochet hook that gives you that ergonomic feel. Tip number three is to try different ways of holding the hook. There are two main ways that people hold crochet hooks. One is called the knife grip and one is called the pencil grip. If you've only tried one, you may want to consider trying the other, see if that's quicker for you. You can also look at where you place your fingers on the hook and see if that makes a difference. Tip number four is to try different ways of holding the yarn. There are probably about as many different ways of holding yarn as there are crocheters. So you may want to wrap it around your fingers. Some people just sort of pinch it between their fingers. You can also adjust how far away or how close you hold your index finger to the project that you're working on and see if that helps with your speed. Tip number five is to choose the right yarn. You want to make sure that the yarn is not too thin, not too slippery, not too dark, and that it doesn't split. Now, again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with working with thin, slippery, dark yarn that splits. I mean, you can go against every single thing that I just said there. It is going to go more slowly though. So if speed is what you're working on, those yarns are not going to be the fastest to work with. But if you improve your speed, you will go more quickly even with those yarns. But those aren't the yarns that I would use to when you're working on improving your speed. Tip number six is to make sure that the yarn that you're working with is easy to pull, like to feed more yarn into your project. Some people ball all of their yarn, whether it's a center pull ball, or just regular ball with the yarn wrapped around the outside of the ball. Some people use yarn bowls. You can use their yarn bags. You can find tutorials online for how to make a yarn holder out of a soda bottle. Tip number seven is to make sure you're in a good sitting position. So this is going to be a little different for everybody. Some people like a big comfy chair. Some people like to sit on the couch or prop their feet up. But the main thing to keep in mind is you want to be in a position where you're not going to get uncomfortable if you sit there for a while. You also want to make sure that your arms are supported, especially your left arm. If you have your left arm kind of locked into your side or not having anything under your left arm, it can be more uncomfortable for you. You want to rest your elbow. You want to make sure that you have good light and that you're not having to strain to see. And you also want your neck to be in a comfortable position. If you're holding your project down in your lap and you're having to hold your head way down, it's not going to be very comfortable. You want to be sitting in a way where you can place your yarn ball or yarn skein where you want it. So if you want it, if it's easy for you to pull with your left hand, you want to sit it on the left side of your body. You want it in the floor? Do you want it in your lap? So try different methods with that and see if any one of those works better for you. Tip number 8 is to choose the right project. And when I say right, again, there are projects that are super fun and that you're going to really enjoy doing that are super complicated and you have to really pay attention. Those are not the ones that are going to go quickly. You want it to be not too complicated so that you have to keep referencing your pattern over and over again. You don't want it to be too challenging for your skill level. So if it's something that you're just learning or you're not as familiar with, it is going to slow you down. You also want to think about the different types of stitches and how quickly you can do those. So if you think about something like a single crochet versus a half double crochet versus a double crochet. So obviously some of those have more steps than others. And so being able to do an individual stitch is going to take longer. But again, if you're looking at speed in terms of how quickly can I finish making a hat, if you're using single crochets, which are going to be smaller individual stitches versus double crochet, which are bigger individual stitches, the double crochet is going to finish the hat more quickly, but it's also going to take longer to do 10 double crochet stitches versus single crochet. So kind of look at how you're defining speed. The same is going to be true when you start looking at patterns that have, puff stitches, popcorn stitches, whether you're working in gaps between stitches, like if you're working in a chain one space versus working into an actual stitch. Working into a space is always going to be faster than working into a stitch, at least for me. Pick something that is repetitive, but it doesn't have to be boring, right? So you want to be able to basically memorize what you're doing without having to look at the pattern. But it may be like a shell pattern or some sort of motif, but it's maybe 5 or 6 stitches that you repeat over and over again. And then maybe there's 3 or 4 different rows, and those kind of, repeats. Tip number 9 is to give yourself time to warm up. Some people actually do stretches. They do like hand and wrist stretches before they crochet. But even myself, like if I start crocheting at least the first several stitches, usually at least the first row or maybe even 2 rows, I'm much slower until I kind of hit my stride and get going. So you want to give yourself time to warm up and kind of get your hands moving and get your blood flowing before you really judge your speed. Number 10, and this is going to be one of, I think, the biggest tips if you haven't thought about it this way before, is to look at the concept of hook under versus yarn over. So when you're doing the stitch, when you think of yarn over, which is what it's going to say in the pattern, you think of putting the yarn over the hook. If you will kind of shift that thinking and look at it in terms of putting your hook under the yarn, it seems like it's not going to be that big a difference, but it actually, when you focus on a stitch as a hook under instead of a yarn over, you're going to be able to go more quickly. It makes the stitches flow into each other more smoothly. There's not as much of a pause between stitches. If you're having trouble getting that really fluid motion, then you probably want to check your tension, check how you're holding your yarn in your left hand, and make sure that you are not too tight in your left hand. Tip number 11 is to feel for your next stitch. So feel for the hole that you're going to be working into, which kind of sounds weird, but I'll try to show you what I mean. So you look ahead with your fingers, right? So as you're crocheting, you're on the stitch that you're working on, and then you have the next stitch that you're going to work into. As you're working and finishing that active stitch, move your hand down to the next stitch you're going to be working into and kind of feel with your middle finger and your thumb where that stitch is. When you put your hook in for that next stitch, you want to be poking your hook into your middle finger. And if you get used to kind of feeling and do this like pinching motion as you move down the row and kind of look ahead with your fingers and with feeling the yarn and knowing that each stitch is going to be that poke into your middle finger, you'll start to get more of a again, I guess you'd call it muscle memory, but you're going to kind of get the feel for what your hands are doing in relation to the yarn instead of just focusing on the yarn itself. Part of going quickly is learning, where are my hands? What does it feel like to do the stitches? Tip number 12 is to find what gets you into the flow when you're crocheting. You may find for you that it's listening to music or podcasts or an audiobook. I find it's helpful, especially if I'm not alone, if you know, my house is noisy for whatever reason. It's helpful to listen to music on headphones or listen to podcasts on headphones. For you, it may be that you like to have company when you crochet, whether it's somebody you're just chatting with, or maybe it's somebody else who does yarn craft and you meet up at a coffee shop or whatever. I don't know if you need to minimize distractions or maximize engagement. I mean, it could be different for each of you. And actually, my grandmother, who taught me to crochet, she would read while she crocheted. Never tried it. I'm not sure I'm to that level myself, but she would read while she was crocheting. So, hey, maybe give it a shot. Tip number 13 is that you are going to have to kind of experiment and figure out which combination of all these different variables works for you. Which hook, how to hold the hook, where you're going to sit, how you're going to sit, what are you going to do with your ears while you're crocheting, are you going to listen to music, are you going to have it quiet. Tip number 14 is to practice. But more what I mean is, maybe practice crochet while you're watching TV. If you feel like you'd like to be able to do that and you don't feel like you're confident enough at this point to be able to take your eyes off your work, try it. You can practice it. I mean, you'll get better at it. You just will. So kind of, trust yourself. Trust yourself that your skills are improving, and then challenge yourself. Maybe, you know, turn a movie that you've seen a bunch of times that you not necessarily going to have to stare at the screen the entire time. And during that hour and a half or 2 hours, just crochet and see if by the end of the movie you're doing a lot better with not having to look at your hands as much and kind of getting into the rhythm more. And be able to practice what I was talking about with, feeling ahead of where you're working and getting used to what your hands feel like and looking ahead with your fingers. And number 15, this may be controversial for some people, but I feel like if you want to get really quick with your crochet, you are going to have to be willing to accept some mistakes. Some people are just fanatical about undoing, frogging any mistake that they see. In knitting, that's a little more forgiving because you can go a few rows down and fix a mistake if you need to. Crochet, if you find a mistake and it's way long ago in what you've been working on, you have two choices. You can either undo the whole thing and fix it, or you can do basically what I do and just leave it. So when you go more quickly, especially if you're doing other things while you're crocheting, is watching TV or talking to a friend, you're going to make more mistakes and you may not notice them until later. So I never fix my mistakes in my crochet work unless I have to. Like if there's some sort of pattern that I'm doing where I totally missed doing a shell and now my next row won't work, or I've added stitches on the end of a row and the shape is going wonky. That's the only time I fix my work. So nobody's going to notice it more than likely. Maybe another crocheter would, but if they do, like, LOL, then what? Like, who cares? I mean, I don't know. Some people may not feel that way, but I'm totally fine with leaving mistakes in my work. I think it gives it character. So that's something to think about. So you are going to make more mistakes as you go more quickly. So if you have any other tips to give on how to crochet more quickly, you want to leave those in the comments. I'm sure people would love to hear them. I'd love to hear them. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up and would consider subscribing before you exit my channel. Thanks for sticking with me. Hope to see you next time. Bye.